roster rumors or reported changes were abound on this Taco Tuesday night. So instead of just typing incessantly on Twitter, I will be productive and just scream into my microphone in my bedroom instead to cover these changes. But yeah, I think just tweets and just reactions haven't really, obviously can't or haven't really addressed all the different aspects of all these moves. So I'll just try to cover all my thoughts, all the issues in this video. I'll talk about the coaching changes, KNG, Taco, and Studio K going back and forth or joining these teams. So I'll start with the teams, what I think the problems with both MIBR and Liquid are, and then talk about the player changes and see how I think that will affect the prospect of these teams or the ranking or the effectiveness of these teams going forward. So let's start with MIBR. So with MIBR, I think if you had to really distill and just give a simple answer or a time-efficient answer of what I think is wrong with why they have so much inefficiency on that roster, why they haven't achieved on par with what you would expect given the talent on that roster, I think it's sort of the disjointedness of this team, and it's not more than just it's more than just like saying that there's language issues or that there's different nationalities. If you watch them play, I think they're not exactly on the same page. On the T side, the way that manifests is that I think that the playmaking has been significantly reduced in comparison to their 2017 or even their 2016 roster, where they seem far more trepidatious about making plays in the mid-round. It seems like they're more trying to adhere to a more tactical, perfect style of play, but that ultimately leads to them being a less efficient side because they have so many playmakers on this team. Think about this team, Studio K, Tarek, Fur, and Fallen. You know, like, seems like they have plenty of opportunities to be a looser team who can take advantage of all the playmaking on their side, but it seems like they're very slow and methodical, which doesn't, I think, suit their play style. And even I don't even think they run that style particularly well. So I mean, they're all right. Obviously, I mean, they do have their T sides. They're not a bad team. They're maybe top 16, top 5 team even, but giving Astralis some good series. But yeah, I mean, and then on the CT side, yeah, but not super effective. But on the CT side, you see a different sort of disjointedness where it's sort of the opposite thing, but the same fundamental problem, where I think what defining characteristic of SK in 2017 and 2016, especially in 2017, even though they sort of had a more quote unquote chaotic or loose roster with Phelps, I think they played post plant situations or late round situations as CTs extremely well. I think they had a very patient, almost Gambit-esque, although they were more active in the opening part of the round, sort of style to CT play, where they had a very fundamental, effective way of gathering their forces after a plant, waiting to the last minute, sort of confusing the other team. Are they going to actually contest us? Can we exit the site? Should we stay? And then right at the perfect moment, coming in as a unit and retaking the site with sort of like a second execute, a CT execute onto the T's defending the plant. So yeah, I think that just sort of disjointed. I don't know if that's too many cooks in the kitchen. If there's Stu 2K used to be an in-game leader, Tarek used to be an in-game leader, Fur is the not Fur, but Fallen is the in-game leader. Cole Zira sort of would co-in-game lead or be a secondary caller on this team previously, or actually in-game led by himself at certain times when SK was struggling. So yeah, maybe it seems very disjointed, and just knowing the players, knowing the history, it seems like, yeah, it just doesn't work. So does the addition of Taco help that problem or alleviate those issues? I think, yeah, certainly it seems that way. The reason that Taco was removed originally, I don't think had anything to do with a play style issue. I think Taco was having an ungodly poor showing ungodly poor level of form at the end of his run, his original run in SK. I mean, go watch those WESG 2017 games, which took place in early 2018. Watch some of those games. Like, it's really not good. He'll get like 5 frags, just absolutely zero impact on the T side. But bringing him back, I mean, yeah, that gets them closer to maybe these guys can be on the same page again as they were previously. There seems to be, there's a track record of that actually working. Maybe he's more willing to buy into that system. Maybe, yeah, that he fits the team role-wise better. Maybe than forcing someone like Tarek to a lesser extent and Stu 2K in a greater extent to accepting more supportive roles. I mean, sort of does a similar thing to Stu 2K, where he does a lot of entering and then a lot of anchor roles on the CT side. So I think, yeah, this is definitely I would say almost certainly a positive move, just adding Taco. Now, it gets more confusing this is, as DK reported, more up in the air. It's not a done deal. It's still in discussion, according to his report. But the idea of KNG joining the roster, too, to add to the 5th of MIBR, that seems sort of counterintuitive or counterproductive if you want to go to a more formal style or a situation where you can be all being on the same page, because that's a guy that I've never played with before. Okay, maybe he speaks Brazilian, but he sort of has this flair as sort of a chaotic combat opera, right? But I mean, they did integrate Phelps into their team fairly well for a good portion of their run together. I think over time it went from a lot of freedom, and then as you go through their run, he just less and less and less until he was an ineffective player towards the end, which led to his removal. But I'm not sold on the KNG one, but of course that's more up in the air according to the reporting, so I'm not going to go super deep into that. Also, the dude hasn't played in a long time, or hasn't played on the top level in a long time, so it's hard to say what his level is right now, if he's changed as a player, what's his deal. I mean, I definitely, like everyone else, respect his 2017 level. He definitely did some different interesting things, was a good player, did do a lot to help Immortals get to the final of a major. So I think it's definitely an interesting move. I think it could work, but I think there's just too many variables and unknowns for me to really go into that. It does seem a little counterintuitive or counterproductive with Taco coming back in, though. I'm not sold on that one. But to go over to Liquid, I think Liquid's it's sort of terrible. I just did a podcast I don't know what's coming out, but I recorded it yesterday, where we tried to really hone in on what Liquid's problem was. And it's hard to pin down. You sort of are stuck coming up with these bland or sort of disappointing answers or theories, or, I mean, frankly, excuses for why sometimes Liquid just doesn't have the wherewithal to show up in series, or just doesn't contest the way they should, versus Strauss. They've had some really pathetic showings. I think this last this last final where they won that first game of Train was a good step in the right direction, but apparently, wasn't enough, and then I guess they're done with this roster. Per the reporting of Jacob Wolf, it's obviously hasn't been an official announcement yet, but it seems like some sort of philosophical internal issue, team dynamic issue where I don't think it's a choking thing. I never really bought that, because if you watch them late in series, I don't think that's necessarily always where they fare. There's a lot of pressure on them in the big match, and that's really close, and then they falter. It's the opposites, where sometimes when they go into the big match, they just never even show up, and sometimes when they are pushed, they do respond well, depending on the series, depending on the time period. But it's like that Mouse Sports final. Obviously, they've sort of faltered under pressure, though I'm not sure I would call that choking. I think it's them. It was them not willing to take risk and sort of waiting for the perfect scenario, waiting, and just something never falling into the lap, and them just being a team that's averse to risk in crunch time, not necessarily that they're crumbling under pressure. So in some ways, I think the Stewie 2K for Taco move is a good idea on that front. Like, okay, it changes the team dynamic. Maybe, he's a guy who's constantly willing to take risk, or more willing to take risk. He might be the spark they need in those moments where they're just not performing at all. They lose 14 rounds on the road to a straw, just something like this. That he can be that positive force to get them back into games to play normally, which maybe can get them out the odd round that gets their mentality back, or their gets them in the right mindset again. But I mean, this just sort of gets into sort of a nebulous or hard to predict zone. But I mean, there's rumors going back to 2016 with that Cloud9 team that Stu 2K was leading, where right after they won ESL Pro League Season 4 finals in Brazil over SK, Cloud9 immediately went out in the group stage. I think they lost to Mousesports to be eliminated. And this was Mousesports way before they were an elite team or a good team, or especially good team, like a top 7 team, top 5 team, where it was rumored that Stewie 2K sort of just lost handle over his teammates. He just sort of got very frustrated. I mean, I think Richard Lewis talked about this specifically in an episode By the Numbers, where he got too frustrated or sort of clammed up or was yelling, and he wasn't a good leader in that moment. That sort of he needed more maturity then, and I don't know if he has it now. But I mean, if you think about Taco as a player, his reputation as a player, he has this, from what you've seen on camera, is a very positive guy, very spoken of as being a great teammate, a supportive player in not just the roles he plays in the game, but in the way he interacts with his team. Now, again, I don't know these guys. This is all sort of conjecture. But is this the right move? Is this a hothead who you want in a team that has to experience failure over and over? The guy who supposedly, again rumored, was part of the early breakup, or surprisingly early breakup of Cloud9 after their major win. He sort of wants to skedaddle out and then get offered to MIBR. Rumored, of course. Obviously I don't know this for a fact. And then left the team. That sort of let the team sort of an awkward breaking point. I mean, is this the guy that's going to be a positive influence in these moments? I mean, you don't know, right? So in that sense, I am concerned about the Stewie 2K move. And then in terms of Raw, how he fits in to Taco's roles, I mean, it is sort of hilarious that like SK or MIBR was like, yeah, Taco is really not cutting as our support player. Let's get a much better fragger, a much better individual player, and we'll just try to mold him into Taco's roles. And then like, okay, this didn't work out. I mean, I actually think Stewie 2K did a fine job playing those roles. I just don't think, the problem was more that the team holistically wasn't on the same page. But then, okay, Stewie 2K not working out. We need Taco back. He can't fit into Taco's roles. And then Liquid makes the exact same move. We're like, okay, maybe Taco is leaving the team. Who can we mold into Taco's roles? Oh, Stewie 2K. It's just like the exact same mindset. It's sort of silly, right? But I think I actually think Stewie 2K does do similar things to Taco, and he hasn't done a bad job of it on MIBR. I don't think this is a downgrade necessarily. I think chances are it might be an upgrade, or chances are it is an upgrade from Taco. I think the bigger issue, I think it's a risk that they didn't necessarily need to take. Now I don't know who initiated the trade or why, who was leaving who. Was it MIBR starting this whole thing and they sort of lost Taco? But I don't think Taco was the problem. I think, again, this was going to be mentioned on the podcast I did yesterday, but I think changing in-game leaders might be a much more interesting and much more fruitful change for Liquid. I don't think Taco was the problem. I think that's sort of the dumb man's looking at HLTV numbers like Taco has the lowest frags. We should remove Taco sort of thing. Even though I do think Taco can be a liability, I generally think he is a pretty good player. And maybe Stewie 2K is an upgrade. I just think it's an unnecessary risk, and it doesn't solve the problems. I think you need a stronger leader in there, someone who, yeah, maybe has experience, can win championships, a good personality on that team. But now that we're in sort of this nebulous zone of talking about personalities and reputations and how they affect their teammates on a social level, I think this is a good time to talk about coaching. Now, coaching, I'm not going to go super in depth on this because I don't know these people personally. It's really hard to assess a coach's effectiveness because you don't know how much that's coming from the in-game leader and how much that's coming from the coach, and how a team plays out their rounds, how they play in the game. And you don't see, the coach obviously isn't in the game. You can't assess their play because they don't play. So I think it's really hard to assess. Supposedly, again, this is more rumored. I think this was by that Rush B guy that Yanko won't be coaching MIBR anymore, and it will be Zeus, as reported by Jacob Wolf, and more firmly that Zeus will be going back to MIBR. I mean, I think, again, like the Taco move is, if they're trying to recapture that old flame of their more, I'll say more perfect, or more refined style. I don't know if it's necessarily better, but at least they're on the same page, right? At least it's a functional style, and it's a style that worked. They were fundamentally a strong team. I mean, maybe just changing from like tactical to more loose, I don't think is the important thing. Is the more important thing is it's a more refined or better system for them. And I maybe if you're going back to Zeus, maybe that will bring that'll refine them. That'll help them get to a better level. But obviously I don't know. I don't know this guy. It's really hard to assess the impact of a coach. Now for the Yanko thing, again, a lot of people give him plots because he's such a great desk analyst. But I mean, again, really hard to assess his impact on the team. Obviously, I don't think it worked out, but how much is that his fault not being a good coach on MIBR? How much is that fallen, or how much is that the individual players not listening? It's really hard to assess these things. I'm not willing to give a say like, well, Yanko did everything perfect, just the player's fault, because you don't know. And just because he is really good on the desk, on communicating his thoughts, doesn't mean that he's necessarily a good coach. And then he also has to run into problems like half his team, or three-fifths of his team speaks a language that's not his. He doesn't know not Brazilian, but Portuguese. And yeah, I mean, English isn't even his primary language, right? Even though he obviously has fluent English from what we can tell from watching him on the desk segments or watching him on broadcasts. So, I mean, he was put in a tough situation. It didn't work out, but I don't necessarily think that's for sure a failing on his part. So it's hard to say on those two. Less certain, but generally I think Liquid's a very questionable move. Even though individually I'm not sold on the idea, like I think other people are on Twitter, that this is a downgrade individually from Taco to Stewie 2K because Stewie 2K doesn't fit those roles. I think he has adjusted fairly well from what we saw in MIBR, but I don't think it solves those fundamental issues with Liquid, so I'm not really stoked about that. I think MIBR is much more positive. It's like, okay, Taco's back. He's back to form. That's a positive move. And then maybe Zeus can help them come back into one page, get on the same page and be sort of have the fundamental strengths they used to have as SK. So I'm much more inclined to say that MIBR won, if you want to put it in those terms, this trade.